Welcome to the CPO Rising podcast series brought to you by Products That Count, the world's largest nonprofit community, engaging over 500,000 product managers and chief product officers united by a mission to empower everyone to build products that truly count. In a world flooded with products, only a few ignite passion, deliver value at scale, and transform lives. Behind those exceptional products are visionary CPOs and high-performing product teams. We recognize these trailblazers through our coveted awards, accelerate careers from PM to the C-suite and beyond through daily best practices, and serve as the trusted advisor to nearly all Fortune 1000 CPOs. Our corporate alliance includes Walmart, Ford, Cisco, Johnson & Johnson, Amplitude, and more. The most admired product leaders across industries serve on our advisory council, guiding the future of product leadership. Together, we're shaping a future where every product counts. Learn more at productsthatcount.org. Produced in partnership with Capgemini and Mighty Capital, this series brings you exclusive conversations between our resident CPO, Renee Niemi, and the 2025 CPO Award winners. Get ready for raw insights, real strategies, and the secrets behind their success. Let's get into it.
So today I have with me Holly Shelton. Holly is the Chief Product Officer of Oura. Holly, it's so nice to finally meet you.
Likewise.
And I just want to start by saying congratulations on being one of the top CPOs this year.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Really excited to jump in and learn more about you and how you lead product for Oura. But before we do that, why don't we just start by having you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what Oura does for those who aren't familiar, maybe a little bit about how you lead and what your responsibilities are there, and maybe your journey to this role.
Yeah. Oura Ring, it's a smart health wearable, a ring, obviously. But really, we think of ourselves much bigger than a ring. We think of ourselves as a preventive and proactive health company that gives everyone agency and control over their health journey to ultimately to make health a daily practice so that we're able to function optimally for as long as we possibly can. I've been at the company almost exactly 3 years now, actually. And when I came in, the organization had a software product team and a hardware product team that were two very different teams. I came in originally to lead the consumer product, both on hardware and software, to bring the two organizations closely together. So we were operating more as one consumer product roadmap. And then about 6 months later was promoted to the chief product officer to lead all products, which basically included into our commercial ecosystem partnership side of the business alongside the consumer. Our teams, when I came into the organization, I was leading both the product management, the insight, and the industrial design and software product design teams. And most recently, I brought in a chief design officer that's now leading. I've always believed that product design engineering should be equal legs of the stool that are in healthy tension with one another. And so now design is in healthy tension with product.
I love it. So you brought in a peer to run design.
I did, yes.
I love that. That's amazing. And what were you doing prior to being in Oura?
So I started my career in mechanical engineering. I then got my MBA and was at Apple for quite some time. I think about Apple kind of as my PhD in the craft of product making, if you will. It was just the most incredible go-to-market machine from taking something from an early concept all the way through to incredibly successful, potent product in the market. I went from there to start my own company, so proper 0 to 1, and then had a stint as a leading product at a sleep tech company, which was where all of my passions kind of came together. I love hardware product. I've always been super passionate about health and wellness. and started to like deeply understand the importance of sleep, which was something that I had formerly quite neglected in my life. I used to have this idea like, oh, we'll sleep when we die. And I started like just becoming really convinced in the science of sleep. And Oura is like this perfect combination of all of my experiences together, which is why I'm here.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like you've had quite the journey. I guess that's where I'd love to start out, like especially at the leadership level. Share with us how you've seen the role of product and product management morph over the last, let's say, 5 years or so.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say that product management has always been evolving and yet not evolving, because at the heart of it, like our job in product is to own the customer and the business and make sure that we're building the right products that are going to bring consumer value and business value. And so the tools change, but the craft really doesn't change, from my perspective. And so obviously over the last 5 years, we've had AI emerge, a lot of new tools in the market, a lot of new tools, even on the design side or road mapping side. I've used product board, I've used Asana, I've used Jira, like I've used Trello. But fundamentally, the actual core capabilities of a PM, I think have stayed relatively consistent. I will say that I'm perhaps biased in the skill sets that I like to see in product. And this is part of my kind of growing up at Apple in product, where at Apple, product management is product management and product marketing in a single function. And so I
Yeah.
really like to think true end to end, and bringing the customer to the early development phase and bringing the product to the marketing and go to market in a very, very nuanced way. And so that storytelling bit on both sides is really important for me.
Yeah. I very familiar with the Apple model, and I've always found it interesting that not more that more companies don't actually follow that kind of end-to-end journey model that Apple has. That being said, obviously over the last few years, our ability to actually make decisions with data, to use AI-driven tools to expedite things have really come into play. Has that changed you as a leader at all in terms of your decision making? And if yes, I'd love to learn how and why.
Yes. I think, I think all of us are a bit more self-sufficient now, and that we have access to data at our fingertips that maybe we would have previously needed to rely on a team for. Um, I've always been, as a product leader, someone that likes to like really obsess over the details, and the data. And so I obsess over understanding the customer. And so the tools have made me more self-serve in doing that, but haven't really changed my approach. They've just made me more efficient, I would say. And then the other thing is, I've increasingly become less, and my teams as well, less kind of PRD documentation. We're still documentation focused, but in a very different way. It's much more about speed of iteration, getting into pixels really early, prototyping, iterating, and like just producing options, like high quality options that we can iterate across. Whereas before, like it used to be a bit more waterfall in that way.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. Some of the chief product officers that I talked to, speaking of that quick iteration, and I love the way you put high quality options, because that's true, right? We'd have, one or two options, and and that was all to pick from. So are you seeing any, I'm going to call it collapsing of roles? So obviously, product managers can now do their own prototypes. with or without design support on it. And I've even talked to some chief product officers, believe it or not, who's gone and created their own mini apps
Hmm.
to demonstrate how quickly it can be done to his team. So I guess, are you seeing that same collapse or not? And I'd love your perspective on it.
Yeah. You know, yes and no. We have two things that are harder to collapse in our stack. One is hardware, and the second is science. And so both of those things, in some ways we can collapse algorithm development. But a lot of our true science work is still very emergent and science driven by a team of PhDs, and hardware itself is much harder to collapse on the product side. And industrial design still plays a pretty heavy role for us. On the software side, definitely seeing just rapid iteration and proof of concept. Less change in the actual development and go to market on it yet, but definitely in the speed of discovery and concepting.
Yeah. That kind of leads me into my next question. The other thing that I've heard quite a bit is just the rapid pace of innovation. Um, in fact, we'll be releasing our report here in about a week, but
Mm.
our new CPO report shows that um, 4x um, rate of improvement and speed for product delivery. So,
Mm.
if something took 4 months to deliver
Yeah,
last
yeah,
year, this year it takes 1 month.
yeah.
So, and for some chief product officers, that can be pretty overwhelming. Now, I know, having been in hardware myself, I know for a fact that you could only push the
There's
hardware
just laws of
cycle so
physics.
fast. But that being said, even hardware innovation and technology is moving very, very quickly. Like, how do you
Yeah.
stay up to speed on the innovation and draw that balance, um, of kind of Horizon 1 deliverables versus Horizon 3 deliverables, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, one way I stay up to speed is just like we're learning from each other, like internally. Everyone's kind of just rapidly sharing, staying up to date in the industry, but mostly just experimenting myself. I like to learn by doing. Now, in terms of like Horizon 1 versus Horizon 3, um, we're using Horizon 3 much more as just the rapid prototyping, not so much the delivery yet. Though like increasingly our product is leveraging both Gen AI and ML. We've always been a very ML first company, but the speed at which we're iterating there is much faster now. Just as an example, without growing our headcount too much, we more than doubled the amount of features that we shipped last year in software. So the speed at which we're moving is much faster, even on Horizon 1. One thing, though, that I'm constantly balancing is that more is not always better, and that sometimes great features just take time to get right. And so I've seen a couple of times where we moved very fast on something. And there just kind of starts to be this mindset like, oh, we're going to then run to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And this like true iteration to make something truly great can falter a little bit. And we're a consumer product that relies on us being like the experience being truly great, and that still needs taste and iteration and focus until something feels inevitable to our end user, which doesn't always happen overnight.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that makes a ton of sense. I love that statistic that double the features with no additional headcount. To that point, hardware, I already mentioned this, but hardware is obviously has different constraints around it. what are you seeing on kind of the hardware front, and are you seeing interesting innovations on that front that are allowing it to keep up with the speed of software? Or I would just love
Yeah.
your perspective on that.
I mean, I'm definitely seeing like our industrial design team is iterating so fast in terms of making prototypes and models that we might come to market with. So the pace of option generation is definitely increasing. In terms of like the kind of manufacturing and going through all of our builds, I haven't seen that dramatically shift yet. I just finished the book, The NVIDIA Way, which I think is going to be a question of yours later. But like,
Yep.
um, they were able to dramatically increase their pace in the go-to-market on hardware. So, and this was before any of these tools. So I know it's possible, but we're living in a time right now with a lot of conflating factors, tariffs hitting everywhere, manufacturing having to shift locations. And so there's a lot of factors that go into speed that don't always scale linearly, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What about things like, I'm going to completely oversimplifize, uh, make this overly simple, but things like um, 3D printing. Is
Yeah.
that something like,
Yeah.
one-to-one manufacturing? Is that something that happens to help speed
We
things
aren't
up?
doing that yet. We are definitely leveraging 3D printing for prototyping,
Prototype.
and we use internal. We have every kind of tool you could imagine in an internal lab. We use our CNC machine quite a bit to produce options. In terms of personalization at that level, we are looking at that. We haven't yet decided that that's the right answer for either the business or the customer.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah.
Anything on the horizon that looks promising?
Um, well, one thing that we think a lot about, so if you think about a ring, like a ring has always been circular, right? But like when we studied the cross section of many fingers, and fingers, as it turns out, aren't circular, and fingers look many different shapes and sizes. And so there are two dimensions that we're always trying to lead in. One is wearability, and the second is sensing capabilities. So we want to have a ring that's so wearable that you put it on and you never want or need to take it off, and a ring that's so capable that it's like putting the most advanced health lab on your body that's continuously sensing. And so as you think about really moving the needle on both of those, personalization becomes super, super important. And super personalization on the wearability front likely will involve us having to deeply understand human anatomy and shapes and sizes in ways that, and being able to adapt to those in ways that we weren't always doing on the hardware front. And the ring has a unique, like if you take a Mac, which I used to work on, like that's just one size. But for us, we're building size 4 to 15 on this right now. And so SKU management becomes something that's pretty challenging for us as you start to
Yep.
think about personalizing.
Yeah, yeah, of course it does. Well, actually, hyper personalization, I would imagine, would help at some level in SKU management. But yeah, it's just the supply chain, the logistics, the shipping, the like.
And like, yeah, it helps a lot on D2C, but as we expand into retail and physical footprints, it's much harder.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Obviously, what your customer needs is super important. I have to imagine the intersection of that versus what they actually know, so they're not going to be able to tell you, has got to be kind of an interesting tension point. How do
Mm.
you and your team kind of compile, understand, get a common view of the customer, so that you're all kind of rowing in the same direction?
Yeah. We do a lot of different kinds of research. So we do a lot of UX research, just deeply understanding how people are using the product, understanding where there's friction points. We do a lot of market kind of need-based research to understand like where's the puck going, what is the market really hungry for, where are there unmet needs that we maybe haven't built for, and then we do we have built something called, it's an inner circle for us, but like pretty loyal users that we're able to go to a lot with concepts that have more definition to them and are just constantly talking to our customers as we iterate and build a feature and bring it to market. Then obviously we're doing A/B testing as we actually get something closer, and refining it to make sure it's actually delivering on the KPI that we set. But a big part of our job in hard work, because there's so many closed door decisions, is to make sure that we really understand where the technology and the market puck is going, but that we also deeply understand what's going to move the needle for customers from a value perspective, with every single iteration far earlier, and then a customer might, think to ask for something.
Yeah, exactly. That's always the challenge, right? You almost have to observe and conclude versus ask and tell, right?
Yes. I come from Apple, which is notoriously like
Customer input.
anti-market research. In reality, I actually found that not to be entirely true, but it was more of a data informing the gut versus never the other way around. And I've always really subscribed to that. I also like to use research to help us identify where are there band-aids that like people are going through so much pain to solve the problem that we could solve through our product.
Yeah, yeah. I actually really love that analogy. I often ask myself, is this a vitamin or is this a painkiller?
And we use the painkiller framework as well. Yeah. But
Well, I guess there's that
I've
intersection
noticed
of
when
health.
I've used that quite a bit with my team, actually. So much so that I'm now a little concerned that we've over-rotated to painkillers, and the vitamins and the delight and actually are very important as well. So I'm starting to think and push a little bit more for a portfolio approach when we think about that.
And it's really interesting you say portfolio approach because, when you think of, high risk features versus low risk features versus high impact versus delight, like, do you have a model that you use when you kind of think of your portfolio and your investment model?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that we do. I like to use the framework where we look at core features, expand features, disrupt, or like net new. So new customer, new product model. And I like to make sure that we're investing a very healthy chunk into the core. We're so early though that we've maybe overinvested in the expand and the disrupt categories. But the other thing that we spend a lot of time thinking through as we look at a portfolio is just the key business objectives that we're trying to drive. When I first started, we had just introduced a membership business on top of hardware. It was the first time we'd ever done that. It's pretty unusual in the hardware industry. And so we had really high engagement at the time, but we had no idea what that was going to look like when we added membership to the model. And so we were hyper focused on making sure that everything we were doing was driving engagement and retention. Now we're hyper focused on getting as many rings on fingers as we can, because our retention and our engagement metrics are really, really strong. And obviously we have to have a mix across those, but that skews the portfolio depending on where we're focused as a business.
Yeah, and that really kind of speaks to, the next question, which is around the metrics. How often do you find that you have to kind of tweak your metrics, your primary metrics, or are they pretty consistent?
They're pretty consistent, but we did recently tweak from retention and stickiness being our primary drivers that everything was queued off of, to growth being more of the driver. And we're obviously continuing to monitor retention and stickiness and making sure that we're not building anything that harms those metrics. But so that was a pretty big shift for the business, for us. But now from there, it's really just an evolution of growth.
Nice, nice. So, when you think about um, kind of the portfolio approach,
Yeah.
do you think about different metrics depending on where it is in the portfolio?
Um, no, not really. We're pretty consistent when we look at the metrics across the business. Though there are, as we get into the disrupt and the expand categories, we're starting to move from a business that's just thinking about growth and engagement to actually moving the needle on health outcomes. So we don't want to be a wearable that's only driving for optimizer. We call them optimizers and maximizers. We actually are trying to move the needle and people actually improving their health. And so we're starting to put quite a bit of effort into understanding what are the metrics that we know drive improved health. It's quite complicated, and you can't do that in a law of averages very easily. So we are putting more of a focus there than we have previously, and those are more in the disrupt bucket.
Yeah, I really love the way that you're really thinking about the portfolio and measuring them. Um, we are now at the fun portion of the interview. We call this the quick question and answer. You've already given us a little insight on one of the answers, but are you ready for it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, first question for you is what makes a great product leader?
I think a great product leader sets a really clear top level vision and objectives, but then creates the space for their teams um, to have autonomy and ownership underneath that. And I generally like to think of three different things, which is the people, the product, and the process, and hyper focused on all three of those, to make sure that they're healthy and that the org itself is capable of driving all three.
Those are the different three P's in product, right?
Yeah,
Normally we think of product placement and pricing, right? But
exactly.
I love it. Awesome. All right. What's your favorite tool right now and why?
um, I don't, I don't know that I have it. This is probably contrarian. I think my favorite tool is honestly pen and paper right now. I've recently gone back to, I've bought some really nice notebooks and pens, and I'm finding that just going back to writing down the key points, and I use AI to like take notes and summarize my notes, but I find the actual act of writing in today's very noisy era to be very refreshing.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I am a huge fan, and I love paper and pen too. Are you a scratchy paper, scratchy pen person or a smooth paper, smooth pen person?
Smooth paper, smooth pen person.
Me too. We'll have to compare notes afterwards.
I'm also a big whiteboard person, and in this era where my teams are spread everywhere, I find pen and paper to be my whiteboard, and I'm like constantly like putting it up on the screen. So
Like, is this it?
yes, yes.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, tell me about, obviously, we're all using, agents with large language models behind them to
Mhm.
help us speed up, unstick ourselves.
Yeah.
Tell me about an insightful, agent question that you've asked recently.
This is one that me and my team started using recently, but we've been using Gemini. We use both Gemini, and sometimes we just record our meetings. And we've been passing those. We actually find the recording to be slightly better, but we've been passing those into Chat GPT and asking it not just like to summarize the meeting, which is kind of good, but actually like analyzing the quality of our meetings, and giving us feedback on how to actually drive more effective meetings, which is like, that's the ultimate in efficiency, is how do we get better with our time?
Yeah, I love that. Any insights on things you can do better that you're able to share?
It's pretty basic things, but there's a couple of things that were interesting. Like, of course, it's obvious that we have an objective, and like desirable outcomes of a meeting, but the quality of the objective really matters. And just going through the motions isn't enough. And then the second thing that I've been interested in is just this repetition of language really matters. And we're using sometimes different vernaculars for the same thing, and the consistency really matters.
I think that's an insightful one. And I've seen this, the larger the organization gets, the more the repetition and consistency of what, when you say MVP, what does that mean?
Yes.
Everything from that to what does a product manager do? The
Yes.
larger the organization gets, the more variance you get, and it just, you're right, it can
Exactly.
create chaos. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Have you read anything interesting? So tell us about NVIDIA Way.
Yeah, we everyone in our greater product leadership team, so engineering science, just recently read the NVIDIA Way, which is like, they operate very differently than they were in person. Like, everything happens on whiteboards. They were incredibly fast at their era. So like, they talk a lot about the speed of light philosophy and making sure that there's nothing in the way of making fast decisions. And they had this Lua framework as well. So like, listen to the question, understand the question, and only then answer the question. So just a couple of takeaways for us, but we're really focused on this speed of light philosophy, because all of these tools can help speed us up a lot. But if we're not getting the politics out of the way, if we don't have clear processes and ways to get things done, if people aren't properly empowered, that's ultimately what slows us down.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I am going to put that onto my now very much growing list of things to read. So, anyways, Holly, I just want to say thank you for your time, for being so generous with your insights today. I've really loved the conversation.
Likewise.
This is SC Moati again, founder and chair of Products That Count. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave us a review on your favorite platform, including Spotify and Apple. And please check out our other resources at productsthatcount.org. They're designed to accelerate your product career and make product the most important function in business. Until soon.